Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our Plant of the Week podcast, brought to you by Bonide Products, family made in America. Visit Bonide.com to find a retailer near you. Each week, Plant Talk Radio's Fred Hauer focuses on a plant that would be a great addition to your landscape. Now for this week's Bonide Products Plant of the Week. Fred, your Plant of the Week.
Well, the Plant of the Week is not one that I have ignored intentionally, but I was certainly reminded the other evening. I was walking from where I parked my car toward the building where I was going to eat. Now, that's not a big deal, except that a breeze came up from behind me, blew through what are called Viburnum carlesi, or Korean spice viburnum. And boy, are they well named. It was almost overpowering. I looked back, and I was pretty sure what the source was. I looked back, and they were probably half to 3/4 full out and blooming. Not every branch has a bloom on it, but they're clusters of flower, about 3 inches across, slightly pink cream, whatever, but oh my, that fragrance. They are so well named. They're a plant that you can keep it with pruning at 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. I have seen it allowed to grow to maturity and unkempt as hitting 5 foot by maybe 8 foot across. Whatever the size, it is tremendous wakening for spring. Now, there is a cousin to it, so to speak, called Juddi, Juddi, that I cannot honestly tell apart from the Korean spice. And I'm not going to worry about who named it and why and so on, but that is one. Then to go on in the Viburnum family, because the whole bunch of them right now are coming into bloom, and there are, at least a sturdy dozen from 2.5 foot tall to 15-foot tall plants in this viburnum group. So I mentioned the carlesi, I mentioned the Juddi. Then one of my favorites also is the Birkwoodi. Now it also has fragrance, not quite as much, but it has a dark leaf, almost shiny or a sheen to it, and quite presentable all summer long as a big background plant. I have one in my yard called Pragensis, or Prague viburnum. Don't worry about that name other than it is an evergreen type of viburnum. It is now reduced because of age to about 4.5 tall, 4.5 across, but it was at the point in its best health days. It was at least an 8, almost 10 footer, and at least 8 feet across. Not particularly fragrant, but a beautiful foliage all winter long. It browns and darkens like all other things, but that. And then the one called Snowball, it just goes on and on and on in the viburnum family. Consider it. Now, the plants can handle some shade. One of the things that I have used is the Allegheny viburnum. The main use I gave it that worked so nicely was under some pine trees that were heading up. There was no foliage, no screening at the 8 foot and down toward the ground level. I planted the Allegheny viburnum in there, which is one of the evergreen leafed types, and they were able to handle the shade, the root competition, and so on. Once planted, and then of course when you put them in competition like that, you have to plan on watering, certainly the first year at uniform times. The second year you should pay attention to the watering, certainly in that period from mid-July through August, September. And then the third year, I don't imagine the client probably did any fussing with them at all. They had gotten root established. Yes, they had gotten established, their roots apparently grown out, and they were doing just fine all on their own. Then there's one other plant that is presently just, I'm going to say glorious. I don't use that term very often, but it is one for the shade. It's called Kyria. Kyria is single-flowered and double-flowered. There is even one that's variegated, but the one I have is Well, little double flowers. They would be no more than 3/4 of an inch across, but they're a golden yellow. They follow the forsythia, and they work really well as a light screen on the ground. Well, on the ground level, they'll hit 8 or so feet tall, and whatever width you want to let them get to. They are a plant that can send out runners, not to the point of invasive, but it will move on you if you don't do any pruning, root pruning, and so on. And then I always tease about this, but you can cut one of the root sections that has a stem, a leaf, a root under it on its own. You can replant it someplace else or extend it in the shade. And then I always tease about the fact that if you get more than 50 of them rooted and use them, you have to get a nursery dealer's license.
It's interesting, Fred. There are many varieties of viburnum, if I'm not mistaken. So the one that the Carless, what do you especially like about it?
Well, its fragrance is just overwhelming, and that's one of the key things. As I said, I was walking in that building, a breeze, and this not like it blew yesterday, but a breeze came in, and from behind. In that I know the plant, I didn't even have to look back, but I did to be sure. They were blocking a view of cars in a parking lot situation, so they weren't living in the best of conditions. They were still, nearly 5 feet tall and probably 4 feet through. Now, given the time to grow, they won't get a whole lot taller usually, but they will get wider. It's a good group of plants, period. Many sizes, mostly shape-wise in terms of growing from a little tiny hedge to great big background plants.
Thanks again for listening to our podcast, brought to you by Bonide Products at Bonide.com. Plant Talk Radio offers other podcasts as well, including our daily Your Gardening Question podcast and our weekly Plant Talk Radio, all available on iTunes or your preferred podcast player. If you have a plant suggestion for Fred, send him an email, fred@planttalkradio.com.